So we're so excited to have Marissa and Hannah with us to talk all about YUPO and how they use it. So for those of you who don't know what YUPO is, it's a super different substrate. It's a surface that most artists are probably not used to. It's a synthetic substrate with a non-porous surface, so it actually repels water. It allows you to create different shapes and patterns that really aren't possible with a typical cotton, watercolor, or drawing sheet. It is available in 2 different weights in the white color, the 104 pounds, and the heavier weight, which is the 144 pounds. And it also comes in the translucent, which is a 74-pound weight too. It comes in the sheets, pads, and rolls. Some people are actually really surprised to hear that it actually comes in 60-inch and 30-inch by 10-yard rolls. And then also different pad and sheet sizes that are all listed on our website. So I'm going to link that all in the description below. So we have Marissa. You might know her as, I might say this wrong. Is it estuary art?
Yeah, you got it. Just say it like you mean it. That's right.
Estuary art on Instagram, which we will also link. She's a fluid and abstract artist from Wisconsin. And then we have Hannah, who is Hannah Rose Illustrations, a mixed media artist from England. So we're going to learn so many tips and tricks from both Hannah and Marissa about using YUPO. So let's get started. Both of you use YUPO in similar and completely different ways. So to kick it off, Marissa, can you tell us what your go-to size and weight for YUPO is?
Yeah, great question. I like to buy it in the large sheets, the individual sheets. I like that because it allows me to cut it down into different sizes, especially if it's like a funky size where if I want to do like a 10 by 20 or something like that. And I prefer the heavyweight, but I also use the medium weight as well.
Cool. And Hannah, what about you?
I actually mostly use the rolls, so I prefer to lay it out across my floor so that I can work without restrictions. I find that works better for me. I do also have the pads, but I tend to go back to the roll every time, and I like the medium or thick in the weight.
Yeah, and I think you get yours from Jackson Art, which is in the UK, yes. Is that right? And then Marissa, do you typically go to Blick Art Materials? I know they stock a bunch of the different the weights and sizes. And then can you both tell us your go-to materials for YUPO? So what kind of like alcohol, inks, markers, anything that you're using on YUPO?
Yeah, I use this is such a fun question because I use everything on YUPO. I use acrylics, but the main thing is alcohol inks. I use Copic alcohol inks. They're the various ink refills, which they just rebranded to just ink refills. But I use those with 91% isopropyl alcohol. But I also use spray paint. I use acrylics. I use fluid acrylics, acrylic ink. I honestly use so much on YUPO, but it's almost always in combination with alcohol inks.
Got it. And what about you, Hannah?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. So my main background is always done with alcohol ink. I use the Ranger inks from Tim Holtz, Jacquard, Copic, a little bit of everything, and then
so all of it.
Yeah, a little bit of all of it. And then I like to use acrylics on top to do the landscapes or the detail or whatever it is I'm painting, really.
Oh, wow. And you can see it all behind you, which looks really pretty. And then how did you discover it, and what was your first time ever using YUPO? Like, because I know that some people might look at it and say, what do I even do with this type of paper? Marissa.
Yeah, so I initially, when I discovered alcohol inks, I was kind of on the hunt for a non-porous surface. Like you'll see some people use like vinyl or photo paper, but they just kind of weren't being as cooperative as I would have liked. So someone had recommended YUPO paper, and once I tried it, I was pretty much immediately hooked, so it just has such a unique surface, and like I'm trying to think of the right word, like it allows the fluidity of the inks in a very unique way. So I kind of discovered it, and as soon as I did it, then I bought a lot of it. So
then
the
how
second
did you,
half of the question. Yeah.
how did you teach yourself to use it?
Lots of practice, lots of trial and error. I had a couple years ago, I did a 365-day project where I did a painting every day just because I knew I wanted to really hone in on the technique and just understand this medium. So, you know, through lots of pieces that didn't work out and thankfully some that did, just over time, you know, I always say that as soon as this medium clicks, it clicks, you know, as soon as you kind of get in the groove with it, you know, it makes so much sense. So, yeah, just lots of practice. Yeah.
Cool. And Hannah, how did you find it?
When I was on Instagram and I used to paint with watercolor, and through finding like fluid art, I then saw alcohol ink and I was like, what is this? Like, I need to try this. And I got my first lot of YUPO and was completely hooked straight away because I was used to working on watercolor paper. Obviously everything soaks in really differently. But with the YUPO, it was kind of like I could make this marbled surface that I hadn't seen before. And we don't really have that in the UK. So it was like a whole new thing. And I got my first YUPO and I was just constantly practicing front and back, which was something that took me a while to click for some reason. Because, you know, like when you do a nice painting, you think, that's it, I can't touch it again. But the practice, obviously you've got to do the front and the back just to make the most of the paper. So yeah,
Right.
I was just I saw it on Instagram, was addicted straight away.
And then you just learned to use it from experimenting.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've got some of my first inks here that look nothing like what I do now, but I would cut the pad and the paper up really tiny and I would just throw color because it, you know, they aren't something that I would show as, you know, like, this is my amazing work.
it looks so different from the work that you post now.
Yeah, it's really different, but that's something that I find is that you just have to keep practicing. And like Marissa said, when it clicks, it clicks.
Right.
And you're able to control it. So it's just practice, loads of practice.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions that are questions that we get almost every day on YUPO. And one of them is how you mount your work. I don't know if you both mount your work or if you frame it, but what do you do with your finished pieces? Marissa?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is something that I've been really kind of learning about recently as well. What I was doing is I was mounting my pieces to wood panels, but I began to learn that it had some temperature sensitivities, the adhesive that I was using. So I don't quite want to recommend that because I was having those problems. What happened is I had this big piece that I shipped last like Christmas, and you know, the mail was so backed up, and what happened is by the time it arrived, it had big bubbles underneath it because it had been in cold, hot, you know, all these different temperatures. So I think that what I like to do now is traditional framing. I've been really excited about doing like framing with like large mats. I hope this holds here, but something kind of like this. And I think that I like this too because then you can get like ultraviolet protective glass, and that just kind of saves a step. Like usually I was spraying the pieces to keep them protected from, you know, the ultraviolet light, but so that kind of adds an additional layer, and if you wanted to, it kind of takes away some of the time from needing to do a spray because you can do the UV protective light. It provides a lot of options with frames. But that being said, I do know that it is possible to mount your pieces to wood. I am still kind of learning. I know that Jane Monteith, she preps her wood panel, I think, first to help like it be mounted a little bit better. So that's something I kind of have to try. But yeah, I like to do the traditional framing at this point.
And then you're framing the pieces all there, or do you send some of the pieces, larger pieces, out to be framed?
Yeah, it kind of depends. Usually I will frame them myself. If I'm doing a commission, it's a lot easier to kind of work with someone based on kind of what they would like. And if they would like very specific kind of frame, I will send it out or have my framer frame it. So yeah. Yeah.
Nice. And Marissa, I think you also frame your YUPO, do you?
You
I mean,
mean
sorry,
Hannah?
Hannah.
Yeah, so again, I'm traditional as well. I just like how it finishes a piece when it's in a frame. So I have my own frames that I work with a local framer to me, and we created a frame that's just for my work, if that makes sense.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's got that pop of pink that I have in most of my work, and to mount it, I use a little bit of acid-free masking tape just around the back of the mount. You just need to put tiny bits in and make sure it's acid-free so that it doesn't, you know, change anything on the front of the artwork as well. And they're really easy to peel off. So if you decide to change your mind or you want to change the frame, it's not going to damage the artwork when you take it off. So it's nice. It's not so permanent, you know, other than like gluing something down. You can change it, you know, because your house decor changes, and it's nice to change the frame with that. So yeah, that's the route that I do as well.
Nice.
I love your frames so much, Hannah.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I love the pink.
Thank
Oh my
you.
gosh. They are just awesome. They complement your work so well.
Thank you. It was really fun. It was an investment, you know, because frames are expensive, especially to have them made. So it was a big jump, but I'm so pleased that I have them because they make such a difference.
Yeah.
They really are very pretty.
Thank you.
So the other question that we get all the time is sealants. Do you put a sealant on your work, Marissa?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I kind of hinted at that a little bit because I know that I'm really interested too to hear Hannah's answer about this. I know people have a hard time finding the sealants that I use, which are the Carmar Varnish by Krylon and then an ultraviolet protective spray. So you have to do the Carmar Varnish first on your piece because the UV spray will affect alcohol inks if it is placed directly on it, I have found. So you do the Carmar Varnish first and then the ultraviolet spray. But I know that they're a little bit hard to find in Europe. So that's another reason that the traditional framing is nice because you can use the ultraviolet protective glass, which kind of takes care of that and prevents the light fastness. But yeah, that is what I use. I also like it because it you know, adheres to YUPO beautifully. You don't have any issues with the varnish on it, even though it is a, you know, a non-porous synthetic surface. So it works really well.
Great.
Yeah.
What do you use, Hannah?
I use exactly the same. I think because
easy.
they've got such a good reputation, I haven't felt the need to try and find something else that does the same job. I do 3 coats of each just to make sure that they are really well sealed, especially with the UV one, because it does reactivate the alcohol. So I make sure there's 3 good coats of the varnish, and then I'll do 3 coats of the UV protector on top of that as well. And they work a treat. That, you know, I've never had any problems with those sprays. So yeah, they're the ones that I would recommend as well.
And do you
Hannah,
have any?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, do you have issues
Hannah.
finding it in the UK, or because I know Marissa, you said that.
I should have. You asked my question, Kate. I should have just sat down and waited.
We all have the same questions.
There have been stock issues that have panicked a couple of artists that I know, including myself, on occasions where I've been like, oh my God, I can't find it, like I need to get it because otherwise I can't finish my commissions. But I use a company, I believe it's called Texil or something along those lines, and that's where I get it from. And so far it's been fine. It's just, I think you need to keep an eye on stock levels, because when they go out of stock, sometimes it takes a little bit longer for them to replenish, but they're the company that I tend to buy from.
So stock up when you can.
Yeah, kind of.
So then another question that we get often is flattening your YUPO sheets. And I know Marissa, you said you get the sheets, and Hannah, you get the rolls. So maybe Hannah, if you can start with how you flatten the rolls.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I use the medium weight for the roll, and I use tiny paint pots, and I just dot them along the edge, along the long edge, and I leave it to sit out overnight. And by the morning, it's mostly straight. There still will be a little bit of a curl, but while I'm painting, I either use masking tape to mask down the paper to my floor or to the glass surface that I'm working on, just to keep it, you know, really flat. I don't tend to have any problems from doing that. To me, it's not really an issue that I have to fight with. I just
Right.
weigh it down on the sides when I'm painting, and then usually it's rolled if it's a big piece anyway to be shipped. So once the client then has the artwork, they can straighten that out either with the framer, because it will be in glass, so it will be pushed flat, or a couple of heavy books, but obviously make sure that the artwork is protected. Don't just put a book on top of it. It's got to be nice and clean.
I was going to ask, if you don't frame a piece that you're sending out to someone, when you ship it, you roll it up into a tube and send it out that way?
Yeah, so I do mounts and I do rolling. Most of my clients are international, so a lot of my work is just rolled. It's much safer, I feel like, when there's obviously a big thin box going. I feel like there's so much more surface.
It'll never make it.
Yeah. So I like rolling them up. For me, I feel much more at ease knowing that it's in a tube. So yeah, but when I store my artwork, they're all stored flat in between sheets of acid-free tissue paper. So that kind of keeps them flat until I roll them.
Right. And Marissa, you typically get the sheets. So do those come flat already?
Yeah, yeah, they usually they come flat, but I've done the same as Hannah before with the roll, just kind of put a bunch of, I mean, that's the good thing about, you know, painting is we've got little tubes of paint all over. You can just kind of dot it along and flatten it out. But I've done the same with rolling. The acid-free tissue paper, I do the same. I use glassine paper over it when I roll it, just to keep it from, I'm always worried it'll smudge. So I like to kind of roll it kind of like a tube with that to keep it safe in transit too.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is a question for Hannah, you specifically. So your work has a ton of detail in it with, you know, you have landscapes and animals. What is your process like? Do you do a background first and then layer on top, or how do you do your pieces?
So for like my fairy landscapes, I like to sketch them out on my iPad first, so I can kind of get color block where I want to put a bridge, or I know it's going to be trees, or there's, you know, that where the eyes are going to be. So I've kind of got like a pre-sketch that I can change really easily. And then I will do the alcohol ink first, so that will give me my background. Once that's dry, I will either paint straight on top of it or seal it, depending on what kind of paints I'm using on top. Some acrylic paints do not like ink, so they will change color, they will change in texture. So I like to be overly careful sometimes with, you know, what I'm going to put on top, but 99% of the time I will just paint straight on top of the ink without sealing, purely because if I'm making prints, I then don't have the spray mark. Well, not that there's a spray mark, but it's just much crisper for me to get a really good scan of the artwork without the spray being on it first.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the way that I work. And then I just use lots of acrylics. I love the golden high fluid acrylic as well, because they just move so nicely on the paper. Again, it's because of the surface is just so smooth. There's no texture, there's no bumps. You don't have to work hard. It just, it glides. It's lovely.
And how long do you give the acrylic, or not the acrylic, the alcohol inks to dry?
Depends how patient I am. I work with an airbrush most of the time, and that tends to do a really good job of drying it out. I know how they change over time now. So say some inks are really bright when you first lay them down, they first dry, and they can become a little bit duller, like 12 or so hours later. I know already what they're going to look like. So I can kind of judge that before I'm starting to paint. So yeah, it honestly just depends on what ink I'm using, because Copic dry much slower than Ranger. So I try not to mix so that it makes my life easier.
And then Marissa, so
Yeah.
how do you choose the different colors for your pieces? And I love that you have your background there, because
Yeah.
when I was looking, I was like, oh, this is perfect.
It's so
So can you talk about like how you choose color, and also the metallic paints that you use?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's usually my starting point when I start a piece, is I just decide on a color scheme. So what I liked to do is, what I ended up doing is making these color swatches, because often it's a little bit difficult to know how an ink is going to interact with the alcohol, especially because sometimes they have a little bit of different textures. Sometimes other colors come out. So I wanted to have them all out, and they're all up there with tape. I'm actually kind of giggling because I think one fell down while I was talking. So what I'll do is I'll actually kind of take off these little swatches that I have, and I'll hold them all up together. And of course, you're going to have some color mixing there. But what I'll do, and I actually have some here, is I'll just kind of hold them all up together. And it really helps me kind of envision the piece. And it's also great for commissions, because I can take photos or even send samples and say, like, what do you think of these colors? Hold it up to your interior. So that's kind of what I do. And then I have the same with metallics as well. So I can kind of, let me see if I can get a little shine there. But I'll kind of do that as well. I like to use the Jacquard Pinata. I really like that. The brass is kind of my go-to. I love to use that. It's just such a wonderful surface, and something that's really unique with YUPO paper is that it's able to lift and float across it really nicely, which is one of the questions I get a lot, is how do you get your gold to cooperate? How do you get it to not sink and stick? And what's so nice about YUPO is, if it kind of starts to get down there, I wear a glove, but I can kind of wiggle it a little bit, bring it up to the surface of the whatever I'm working on, whether it's the alcohol or ink or acrylic, and it can float across it, and it's very cooperative on the surface. So that's the metallic that I prefer.
Got it. And then you both kind of talked about this, but I want to throw this in here. So you both do commissioned work. And Hannah, you said that you kind of sketch out your drawing before you send it out to, or for clients, like you kind of plan it beforehand. How much do you plan beforehand do you like make the piece and say, is this what you want? Or do you have it all planned, send it to them, and then they say, oh, I would change this, this, and this? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so I tend to do a little, I call them a doodle really, because they're not, they don't look anything like the finished result, but they give an idea of how I'm gonna color block. So if I'm doing, say, like a mountainscape, I'll have like pinks at the top going to yellow, then blue, and then greens and more blues. And I will give them a rough idea of what it might look like. The thing with ink and with alcohol is they will do what they want to do. You cannot tell them to do something in particular. They do want to mix in their own ways, which is why they're so magic. So it's kind of like a pinch of imagination of, this might be what it looks like.
Yeah.
And they know from my work that I have on my page what they're in for anyway. So I'll get the commission piece done, and then I will photograph it and say, is there anything that you would like to tweak? Most of the time it's no. Sometimes can we add a little bit more gold in there? Can we add some stars? Really like lovely little details at the end. But most of the time it starts with a doodle, and ends with a big ink. Sometimes I can also send them a photo of the ink before I add any of the acrylic on top as well, to make sure that the color is kind of what they had in mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Marissa, you were saying, so you can kind of send the different colors out and they can kind of choose from the different color palettes, but even going beyond that, do they pick different like designs from other pieces that you've created, or how do you work with clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of have a series of questions that I ask them. One of the best ways for me to kind of envision what they want is I will have them go through my page and tell me favorite pieces from the past that I've done. And from that, usually I can kind of tell which sorts of pieces, like what kind of balance they like. And then what I actually do is I create 2 pieces that meet all of their color and style requirements, and then they get to pick which of the 2 they like, because similar to what Hannah said, inks are different every time, you know. So I don't do edits, but I find that based on them being able to kind of pick between 2 pieces that have the same colors, the same sort of balance, but still some of those textural differences, usually people are pretty happy with that. And it's such a fun process. And also providing 2 choices, it takes the pressure off of me to make like one piece that fulfills 100% of the criteria. And usually from that, I'm, you know, more confident, more relaxed, and enjoy the process as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of finish it out with advice for an artist looking to use YUPO for the first time. I know maybe it could be scary because it's just so different. So what advice would you give to an artist trying YUPO for the first time, Hannah?
Just to play, and do not pressure yourself to create something that you've seen on Instagram. You've got to learn to make mistakes. You've got to make a mess. You've got to enjoy yourself, and it will come with practice. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. Yeah, it just comes with practice. So just try and take the pressure off to create something mind-blowing, and just learn to play. Like I said with the first inks that I did, they're nothing like what I do now. But if I hadn't have done those, I would never have got to that stage.
Right. And Marissa?
Yeah, kind of got to mimic Hannah, have fun, and just really enjoy the process. Something I like to give to beginners is more of like a technical piece of advice, is don't be afraid to pick up your paper as you work. I call it tacoing, which is one of the reasons I love YUPO, because you kind of pick it up, and often what I do is I play with the ink by kind of tilting and moving the YUPO. And I've found that that's one of the best ways to kind of learn how the inks flow. It kind of separates the pressure of learning how to like use your breath or use a heat gun or whatever tool you use, and use a lot more alcohol than you think. Like, just challenge yourself to use like a ridiculous amount of alcohol. Like, if you think it's too much, add twice as much. Like, like just add a lot of alcohol. That is the most common thing that people are frustrated. Is like, I can't get my inks to move. Why aren't they moving? They have to have something to encourage it to move. So use a lot of alcohol, but the most important thing, absolutely have fun. Just enjoy the process, and yeah, don't pressure yourself. Have, you know, just have fun with it. It's such a fun medium.
Yeah. And we do have sample packs. So like if someone wanted to try out the translucent, or someone wants to try out the heavier weight as opposed to the medium weight, we have sample packs with all of them in there. So don't feel pressure like you have to choose one and stick to it. Definitely try them out. And we also have those little mini pads that I was going to say, Marissa, those would be perfect for your little swatches back there. The little mini pads
are so cute. I can't handle how cute they are. I did forget to say, I do have these swatches as downloadable PDFs also for free. On my website, you can download. I have all the Copics, the Rangers, Pinatas, and T-Rex inks that you can download, so you can kind of see, and then hopefully people can have like a more informed decision of which inks they want to buy, because sometimes, like, it's wonderful that there's so many colors, but if you're going to try something, you really want to feel confident in the color you choose to buy when you first start. So you can download those on my website.
That's great. And yeah, we'll link your website and also your website, Hannah. We've done like an interview with you, Hannah, on our blog. And Marissa, I've been posting about your mounting the YouTube video everywhere. So
yes,
we'll have that all posted right in the description in the YouTube channel. But thank you guys so much for your time and joining us and giving all your tips and trips for YUPO, because I know it can be confusing, but it is a fun paper. So thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This was fun.
Thank you. This was such a delight, and getting to meet you both more or less in person has just been so much fun. Oh my gosh. And
Yes.
Hannah, I love your work so much. It's just
same.
congratulations. It's just beautiful, and it's just so fun to meet you. And Paige, I know it's more special when you get to meet on even on a screen than through email. So, and thank you for all of your help and everything. And yeah, you are both just delightful.
Oh, thank you.
To you. It's
Yes.
beautiful to talk to you, to actually have conversation and to see your work in your studio as well. It's brilliant. I love it.
I know. It is so different talking to someone through Instagram and then actually like,
Yeah.
oh, this is like the actual
Yes.
person. I feel like I know you already, but I guess I don't, but now I do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time.